my voice problem. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Really, thank you all for coming. I know some of them, and as Karen mentioned, we've had water in the research center, so I'm very grateful. We helped to have my notes. Now, regarding my topic, for those of you that don't know, the Hollywood Historical Society, not just me, we published this book called Then and Now Hollywood in 2008. And it was pictures of certain sites and then what they looked like at the later. And we still sell that one. But it was 15 years ago, so I thought I would see how things had changed and add some stories about the sites, not just the pictures. The talk is kind of random in order, but I'm still focusing mostly on the 1920s and 30s and the city that Joseph Young created. So it will be interesting to look for positive changes. Now, I have to get used to doing this. Okay. You all can see that, right. So I'm actually beginning at the beginning. The man in the underbrush is Tony Michelson. Sometimes you see another man who has rather high hair. This is Tony, my father. He is facing the area that was cleared for the FEC tracks and the Dixie Highway. So his back is to the east, as it is in the other picture. Apparently, Young said to Tony, who was the head of surveying, "Stand here, this is where my city will begin." And the survey of Hollywood Boulevard began here. And then this is the same spot 50 years later. He's not around anymore. Both photos had been published. The first was in the Young Company's newsletter, and the other was in the Hollywood Sun-Tatler. Hollywood's first permanent building was put up because Young needed a repair shop for his fleets of trucks and buses. So I can quote from somebody now who actually worked here and did a 1976 oral history. His name was William Osmond. He said, "When I first came to Hollywood, my first job was with the Hollywood Company at the garage. We had 101 Model T Fords. They used to call them land crabs because they ran back and forth to the rock pits. They started building Johnson Street and had to put in about a foot deep of rock when they built it. My first job in the morning was to see that all the trucks were out on the road. In those days, you had to crank the Model T by hand. We had more than a dozen men with broken arms hanging around here.
Oh my gosh.
So in the morning, we would get them all gassed up. Then we would push one truck up against another in the mornings to get them all started, pushing rather than cranking. And on cool mornings, which they had back then, they were hard to start." Bill Osmond was from Cuba and came to Hollywood about 1922, following his sister Lily, who was married to Clarence Moody, head of utilities for Young. So surely these are the first two Cubans in Hollywood. The men who carefully posed for this photo, showing who was driving J.W. Young's fleets, the local black population, local mind you, chiefly from the Bahamas, would soon influence Young's decision to create an all-black incorporated city, Liberia. At that time in Florida, blacks were not allowed to be in incorporated white cities after dark. I'm sorry I didn't get the name because of the rain of the muralist, but note how he or she has used this line, the same line of the building. It's exact, but it's used as part of their design. The pilasters are part of the design, and then they have added this triangle as part of the artwork. This is Hollywood Boulevard. Is my arrow on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. This is Hollywood Boulevard, and this is 21st Avenue. And of course, now you can see that this area is where it was open for the trucks.
Is that the northeast corner, Jeff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oops. I'm sorry, this is very touchy. I don't want it to jump that fast. There. Now this is also about the garage, but it's about the buses, the white buses. The photo on the left is a panoramic photo in our collection, and it comes over curved when we took another picture of it, but it's actually flat. So note the grass patch in the foreground. Let me just take this clip off. Okay. That's, again, the corner of 21st and Hollywood Boulevard, and the railroad tracks are just beyond, just stand where they are now, obviously. The other photo is the Parkview Hotel, which is no longer there. And in this photo, it's not quite finished. You can see scaffolding on it. Young owned 60 white buses with which he brought visitors down to see Hollywood from Chicago, Indiana, and elsewhere. The 2-week trip was described by Edith Whitson in her oral history, which we have. She had worked in sales for Young in Indianapolis and then came to Florida with her husband Ed, who I believe came down by train. She took the bus trip in 1923, and here is Mrs. Whitson's story. The roads were so bad in one place, one bus slid off the side of a little mountain, and in another place we went over what they call corrugated road. It was very marshy, and one of the women sustained a broken back, and we had to take her to the hospital. On that 2-week journey, we had a great deal of excitement, but not so much as the people who saw these 27 large white buses, which were a novelty at the time. 27 of them in a caravan passing through the country, and all the people on the farms every place came rushing out. They'd heard about it ahead of time. It was a great advertising scheme. By the time we reached Hollywood, a great tropical storm had come up, and it just poured. As we got into the Parkview Hotel, we were drenched just getting from the buses to the hotel. Well, welcome to Florida. Wait a minute. But she says, it seemed that all of Hollywood was in the hotel waiting for us because it was quite an exciting event. A great selling scheme for Mr. Young, and there were a lot of selling on from that trip, and from then on, those white buses were used everywhere, bringing people to Florida. Liberia, starting at the beginning, Liberia begins in 23. Prior to founding Hollywood, Young had created developments, sold the lots, and then moved on. Hollywood was his first planned city. In 1923, Young bought land and planned his second city, which he called Liberia, America's new town for African Americans. It was expected that African Americans would share something of the prosperity that Hollywood had brought to Southeast Florida. The plan that I have here shows that it was designed on the same lines as Hollywood. Hoping my mouse works. This is Hollywood, the first square mile that Young bought, and then he had a wide boulevard, a circle, and a place for a hotel. And here is Liberia with a wide boulevard, a circle, and a place for hotels. And it was on the main road, which was the Dixie Highway. I won't go into Liberia anymore because there's currently a documentary on Liberia in progress. Here we have as I say, I'm jumping around now. This is downtown looking east. Isn't it great to have color? It makes such a great contrast. The building on the right is now the Broward Building. And it's been occupied, it's, as you see, has really barely changed, although I know a lot of renovation was done on it at one time. In the 40s and 50s and about here, there was a dance studio called Billy and Ruth's, and somewhat later over here was another dance studio with Jackie Sauls, and that is obviously not Jackie Sauls, at the Dali. Both these studios didn't teach Arthur Murray. His studio was somewhere else. It was tap, ballet, and gymnastics. My friends and I went to Billy and Ruth's, and at one point we performed a samba at the Colonial Inn. And in case this, I can tell you that Dali muralist is Fabio Onrock. the Great Southern Hotel. We have the original drawing showing and the hotel today. You've heard the story about Young needing a second hotel. There were so many people flocking in, and he needed more temporary housing, so he hired a prominent Miami architect, Martin Hampton, to design it. Hampton had worked in Palm Beach with Addison Meisner. This is his original plan. He signed it down at the bottom there. The new story here is, the now story, is that the entire building was demolished and completely rebuilt, as you see here, looking better than it had in recent years. I don't think it's a hotel anymore. I think it's just part of this taller building. This is another Hampton design, Young's Golf and Country Club. And it's now just an enormous dirt pile on the corner of Polk Street and 17th Avenue. It was demolished back in the 50s. That's what it looks like. Drive down Polk Street and you'll see it. But this is the country club dance floor. The club was famous for its glass brick dance floor. It was lighted from below, and with the roof rolled back, people danced under the stars. It was considered extremely glamorous. They wore formal dress. They had famous orchestras, even Paul Whiteman's. And so here's a story. The Youngs went there often to dine and dance because they had visitors from as far as Miami and Palm Beach. And they would came to mingle with the visitors. So when they arrived, Jessie probably wearing her stunning red dress that J.W. had bought for her in New York. The band was cued to strike up the song On the Road to Mandalay, which was Jessie's favorite song. The next lines are, where the flying fishes play, and the dawn comes up like thunder out of China across the bay. So Mrs. Young is coming in and they're playing her song. One of the featured dancers was named Anita Furman, and she was from the Gilda Gray Company in New York. Gilda Gray famously invented the shimmy. The dancer, dressed in a fitted dress with beading and fringe, shook her shoulders so the beads would shimmer. And so no doubt Anita demonstrated the famous shimmy right here on this dance floor in Hollywood. Sometimes I read about someone shimmying up a pole. So, I think they mean shinny, using your crossed ankles to shin up the pole. That's just me talking. But now for our exciting find, which is still, the other photo there. This is Hampton's plan for the lighted brick dance floor. An ad for Hollywood placed by the Young Company raved about this. It's famed for its unique and beautiful features. Through its glass floor, varying colored lights play upward, not just straight up, but varying. We didn't know that before. This feature of the dance floor was highly unusual, and no one recently has considered how exactly it was done. And now we know. In our archive, we were peeking at fragile plans we've had for a while, but they're huge. They're 3 feet this way, they're blueprints, and then about 6 feet this way. And fragile, as I say. So we didn't want to touch them, but we managed to open them enough to see this label here and see what it was. And we discovered that it was the actual plan for the glass brick. And it describes in this plan how the lights would be changed. Rumor has it that the country club might be rebuilt, and we would be happy to share this document if they do that. But at first we'll need some serious conservation. We've had a conservationist look at it. It can be done, but it will cost money to do that. So.
How did the roof retract? Where did it come into it? Do you know?
I'm sorry?
Earlier you said the roof retracted to show the stars.
I don't have pictures of the roof. It was canvas and it rolled forward and back. That's another story I can tell you about some other time. The Hills Hotel was on the third circle, and it was built by Young out in the country. So he would have a country hotel and then a beach hotel. but it served only briefly as a resort, and then essentially became barracks, first for the Riverside Military Academy, and then the U.S. Navy Gunners Training School in World War II. So this is one replacement of a building that I like. The hotel had probably served its purpose for 40 years and was plain worn out. I admire the replacement, the presidential building, because it's true to Young's vision for his city plan, which, following City Beautiful ideals, was to have a wide central boulevard running east and west with a major structure on either end, the Beach Hotel and the Hills Hotel, and then Florida being flat with nothing to look at. These large, handsome structures would draw your eye from downtown out to the boundaries of the city. The presidential building admirably still does this today, even though, of course, the city goes much further west now. So this is an example of a good resolution, my idea of a good resolution. And here is Young's magnum opus, the Beach Hotel. And as I say, this was designed as the culmination of the Broad Boulevard at the east. Clive Taylor, our president, has done a study of the Grand Lady, and there is a documentary video, and also we've had an exhibition up. Susan, is it still up?
Yes, it is.
Yes, okay, so it's still up, and you can go see the documentary about the Grand Lady. So what I show here is the building in all its glory, and now with the ornamentation stripped off. I actually watched a worker chiseling these lines off the entrance. Boggles my mind.
When was that?
When I saw that, last year.
Oh.
Maybe like more recently. I can't answer, I don't know what they're going to do with the hotel. Okay, here's another of Young's major structures now demolished. All we have left is the safe from the bank. So this is a sad now. But I would like to say that this early photo was taken by two brothers who came to Hollywood after World War II in their plane. I don't know the make. Took numerous aerials, which we have. They sent us the photos and the negatives, so they're very interesting photos, and so thank you, Beering Brothers. Now let's go out to the beach. This is a panoramic photo that belonged to my mother. We're looking southeast from Ocean Drive to the west facade of Young's Swimming Casino, which we'll see later. So the buildings that I'm showing you these are shops on Johnson Street. Then this is the back of the casino. Then this white building is the J.L. Franks apartments, which were at 329 Buchanan Street. Then the Daniel Russo house at 324 Indiana Street, and the Beach Hotel under construction. The central building, the Franks house, was the first private building built on the beach in February of 24. And there was such a need for housing that the Franks soon opened it as apartments, but it was only recently it's gone. But the Russo house was built a month later at March of 1924. And it was a private building, the second private building on the beach. The Russos actually added the second floor. Here it is in the photo, big photo. So this is how was next. They just added more coquina rock. And eventually in the 30s it became Hollywood's first hospital, the Gulfstream Hospital. And you may know that Pat Smith, our former curator, was born there. And here it is today. This is one of Karen's beautiful photos. This is now the oldest building on the beach. Surely, it has a great history. We need to save it. Wouldn't it make a wonderful little museum for the story of Hollywood Beach? What have I got next? Now here I skipped my page. Okay. Oh, I see. Sorry. Okay. What I have here, the little house was the Chandler Parson house, and then behind it, the small building is the CAVANAUGH apartments. I took the picture on the left about 10 years ago. The little house has a story. It was built around 1924, and in September of 1932, it was moved from 2606 Washington Street, that's way out in the Little Ranches, to this site at 317 on Arizona Street on the beach. The mover was likely C.B. Smith. He had to haul it somehow over to the boulevard bridge, over the hump. It was the hump bridge then, cut around a couple of corners and put it on at this place. The new owner, Chandler Parsons, was Commodore of the Hollywood Yacht Club. When he died in 1939, the Hollywood docks were dedicated in his honor. The house remained until about 2015, for about 80 years. Now it's gone. And here's the casino with its Olympic-sized pool. As you probably heard, I learned to swim there, and all the kids my age in town did also. It was becoming cut back and cut back. The wings on the two sides were dressing rooms, which we eventually called cabanas. You could just go and change in and out of your bathing suits there. But eventually those were taken away, and then the baby pools were gone, and I think the three-story diving tower stayed. But finally there was very little left, and it was demolished in the 60s. I have heard rumors that it was partly because whoever they are, Powers didn't want to desegregate the pool. This is 1960s, so that's possibly true. But the building by then had been really greatly cut down. And so now it's Margaritaville, which is a good plan. It's set well back from the... I can't actually hear you.
It was a very nice park for the kids before they put Margaritaville there.
Well, there was, yeah. Well, there were many things. I'm just telling you what we have now.
Joe, was that the flamingo pool?
Wait, if you interrupt me, we won't get to the end.
Was it?
Let's wait till the end.
You say it's a casino pool, and I thought the flamingo pool was there where Margaritaville is.
It was the same pool.
Okay, that's what I wanted to
Yeah,
clarify. Thank you.
it was the Olympic-sized pool. I think the wave pool is fun, but it doesn't compare to the casino's Olympic pool. Well, here's another one, the railroad station. I think Karen did a marvelous job on this one, the comparison. He built this station, his architects Rubush and Hunter, in a beautiful California Mission Revival style with the extended wings, which also the missions out in California had covered walkways, which that looks like. And the wings here protected waiting passengers from the sun and rain. This was demolished in the 70s to straighten out 21st Avenue. There are rumors about rebuilding this as well, so hopefully. This little building was a small hotel that Young built in 1924, not for visitors, but he needed rooms for his beach hotel help. And it was just demolished about a month ago. It had been an apartment. However, this is still here. Here is an example of a Young period building that is still in use, although without the decorative urns. These just crack me up. Here they have this very geometric building with big plate glass windows, and then they put urns on top of it. But happy to say, as shops and offices, this was called that was the Harrison Building. It still is, and it's still shops and offices. During World War II, when Hollywood was a totally Navy town, the officers stationed at the beach hotel were free to use the country club, on the golf course because that belonged to the owners of the beach hotel. But this left the thousands of sailors stationed out at the gunnery school, Riverside, with no place in town for R&R. So Hollywood citizens got together and created a local form of USO in this building, keeping it stashed with homemade pies and cakes, a jukebox, furniture, games like ping pong, and friendly folks, including girls, to chat with. And we have now Fountain Court, 813 Tyler, you can see that, I guess. This was still built in the 20s. It was close to the ocean and North Lake, so the breezes probably kept it cool. By 1925, Jacob and Mary Rust were living here, down from Evansville, Indiana. He was in the laundry business. In 1927, they were joined here by their daughter, Vera Hammerstein, and her husband, Clarence, who had been living in Miami since late 25 because they found Hollywood so crowded they hadn't found living quarters until 27. As you see, the Fountain Court looks much the same today, except the windows are sealed now to accommodate air conditioning. Rumor has it that this handsome and historic type site might be demolished, so can we save this one? Here's another one. This is an unusual 1920s building that you might have seen every day, but wouldn't recognize. It was built in 24 or 25, mimicking the form of a California adobe or a ranch house with the balcony running along the second floor. And that was another style that Young liked, but this is the only adobe that was in Hollywood. It was probably an apartment house even then. It was named the Vista del Colegio. Doesn't that sound elegant? But it means view of the school, and the school in question was Hollywood Central. This wonderfully imagined structure still stands, but now looking quite ordinary, and I don't know when it was plastered over. Here are two of my favorite homes from the early 20s. The one on the right is the style of the Green Brothers of Pasadena, California, their bungalows, with a one-eye eyebrow in the porch roof and the heavy columns, sturdy columns supporting the roof. And the other is kind of a whimsical version of Mission Revival with its inviting open front porch. They belong to the Adlers, Solomon and his wife in the bungalow, and sisters Victoria Landman and Hattie Adler with the open porch. They also were from Indiana, and they owned one of the first ladies' dress shops in Hollywood. It was called Adler's. Although Jewish, Hattie and Vic were close friends of my grandmother in the Christian Science church. When they came to my wedding, Hattie Adler was 100. So I've always been quite fond of these homes. And here is that address today. I asked Karen, where are my little houses? And she said, this is worth it. Good picture, though. Now, I was planning to quote more about the 26 hurricane, but after our own experiences last week, I'll save that for another time. But I do have a couple of comments about buildings of that time, and particularly this one, because I have some good photos of it. This is called the Hollywood Furniture Company, here on the right. That white space is actually just a gap. It looks odd in the picture, but it's just a gap between the buildings. And as you see, it's still there. It survived right into the next century. This is what the photo I'm talking about. This is post-hurricane, and it's also not really curved. And what you see, what they did was, and I've seen this done even today, they just put slats across the windows. They didn't know quite what to do about a hurricane. The building in the middle was just under construction, and I don't know whether this was rebuilt or something else was built there, but the theater and the furniture company managed to stand. The manager of the Hollywood Furniture Store within left us some memories in his oral history. And they asked him what style of furniture was most popular in Hollywood in '25. He said reed furniture, or we would call it willow furniture today. But it was mostly light-colored reed furniture. There was no dark furniture sold in Hollywood at that time to amount to anything. He was asked, was it because everybody felt they were moving into the tropics and therefore they should have tropical furniture? And he said, I think that is correct. I thought that was fascinating because now we know they were buying what we would call wicker furniture, reed furniture. I wish I could see some of it. Here is a temporary structure that was no great loss. This is the Broadwalk looking north, and this building was the Young Company Beach Sales Pavilion. You would go there, they would give you lunch, a sandwich, an apple and pie and coffee and a lecture, and then you could buy land. But Virginia Tenike in her book showed what happened to, it was just a frame building. So here it is after the hurricane, out in the middle of North Lake. But there's more to the story. In the 30s and 40s, it was called the Pavilion. They built the cement building, and it was called the Pavilions or the Ovens. And I don't remember even that they were there recently, but today it's Charno Park. So, now another one. As I say, this was on the National Register of Historic Places. Hollywood had something like 3 or 4 on the National Register. This was one of them. So people were beginning to build again in the 30s. And for example, the Christian Scientists, including Jane Ray of Flamingo Groves was one, and Hattie Adler that I mentioned. By the late 40s, their church had expanded, so they built a larger one than this next door and gave the original church to the Garden Club, who moved it. C.B. Smith again at work. And he moved it out to just to the west of I-95 on Hollywood Boulevard. And it sat there for a while, and then it wasn't used. It began to deteriorate, and now it doesn't exist. I don't know whether it really had gotten so bad, but anyway. However, other builders at that time, the Masons in Hollywood, at first belonged to a lodge in Miami, but they'd set up their own lodge on the second floor of the Tyler building at 20th and Tyler before 1925. So in the 30s, they began building their own lodge at the northeast corner of 19th and McKinley Street. And here they are dedicating their property, and you can see some of the Masons wearing their aprons. I particularly like this photo because this is 19th and McKinley, and look, all the empty lots, just a few houses. And it looked like this, you know, when they were building. It will look like that up to the 50s, up to World War II. But they did build their own lodge, which is this other building here. And it was used in the 50s when I was a Rainbow Girl. The Masons eventually moved west to the west of Hollywood, and the building is now Covenant Temple. Here's another 1930s building. We're now in the 30s, by the way. The Hammersteins that I've mentioned before decided that, and the Russ, the parents and daughter and son-in-law, decided that they would build, and they owned quite a number of lots right here on Polk Street. More than just the ones the house is on now. They had more, but they chose this lot, these lots, and they decided to build. They hired Bayard Lukens and built this house. But while it was being built, they took an apartment in this building, which still stands at 1538 Polk, to watch their Lukens house being built. And I was amazed to learn, but that this 1538 house was actually there in 1925. That doesn't fit Young's designs at all, but it's nice to know the connection with the Hammersteins. Another building or structure that was built in 1938 or so was the outdoor school. And the headmistress back in 1925 was quite the flapper. I still have this umbrella. It was waxed Japanese paper. I can't open it anymore, but it was really quite fun to have it. But she got married and moved, had a child, and by the late 30s, she was owner and headmistress of the outdoor school, 2305 Polk Street. She started it as a dancing school with a floor first and no building, just to provide something for her under school-age daughter to do. Hollywood Central didn't begin till first grade. There was no nursery or kindergarten in town then. And as soon as she did that, all my friends' parents and other local parents quickly enrolled their youngsters. And the school began with its trademark three-sided building. It had walls on either side and at the back. And then awnings that could be dropped in the front in case of rainstorms. It seems that outdoor schools were popular at the turn of the 20th century, even in northern climates, as being excellent for lungs, exercise, and fresh air. Miss Harris had a similar school building in Miami. And continuing the family tradition, Lamora's great-grandchildren are now attending a completely outdoor school in upstate New York. This is one of my personal favorites in Hollywood, and there is no, this is now, then and now, both of them. If a house could be put in a museum, this would qualify. It was built in 1938 for Harry and Ruth Sims, and designed by Miami Beach architect Henry Hohauser to resemble a large yacht. It's a perfect textbook, streamlined, modern in design. In the later 30s, as the Depression lifted, people began to travel again. And this style, and not just this house, the style of streamlined modern, captures a sense of movement and speed. And it's good to see that the present owners have, this is the later photo, this is Karen's recent photo. They've restored the classic geometry of the house by removing these distracting storm shutters. 30s, another vision of 30s design, streamlined modern, is a streamliner. And another one is our wonderful Florida Theater. Streamline is also called International Modern, and it's heavily based on geometry and the machine. And you see the straight lines and then curving but balanced. It was, and inside, by the way, it had plush sheets and air conditioning. And I think the what?
Can you go back one slide to the streamliner? You just showed it, it went kind of quick.
Yeah, so you can see the streamline, but streamline, it was just, things like that were made to move forward. I'm a student of the 30s art, and they really, motion was very important to everybody. I think the first movie was Snow White. I have to look that up. And after the '63 fire, which is the other picture, the site's just remained a parking lot. Now this is more, I'm going to have a story here, but the LaBelle Villas at 2432 Taylor Street were designed by the father of Leo LaBelle, who owned them. He was an architect from Chicago, and he would have been well aware of streamline or international modern, with its derivation from the machine being geometric with straight lines and cube forms. And you can still find many similar 30s houses like this on the beach, often complete with metal rails lining the sunroof like a ship. But mostly I include the LaBelle Villas, this is what they look like now, because of this key, which was donated to the Historical Society by Larry LaBelle, who was the son of Leo and Catherine, because of its history. The key tag reads, room 274, Hollywood Hotel Key, Hollywood, Florida. And then the circle part that I couldn't make out to read, but I remember reading it, it says return by post. Something like, you could put it in the post office, in the mail, and they get it back. Well, it was the key to a room in the original Hills Hotel. So it was the key, wherever room 274 is, it was in this hotel. built by Young in 25 and had become the Naval Air Gunners School when the Navy requisitioned it in World War II. Larry LaBelle told us that his parents had rented one of the villas to an officer stationed at the Naval Air Gunners School, who clearly preferred his own private quarters to a room in what had become a barracks for 19-year-old Navy air gunners. Apparently, the locks had not been changed since 1925. So now we have this century-old tangible item from J.W. Young's Hollywood. I think I have time to put in this last one, which I wasn't sure. So, as you may have noticed, some of this is fairly personalized by my family and people I know. So here is Fletcher Street. And have you ever wondered who Fletcher was? Well, some of you know that when Young bought land south of Washington Street, when they started, they only had they didn't own all the way to Hallandale. And he named the presidents going the other way. Then he bought the land next to Hallandale, and he came running into the engineer's office looking for names for the streets. And my father happened to be standing there, so he suggested, he'd been in the Navy in World War I, and he came up mostly with admirals. And one of them was Admiral Frank Friday Fletcher, born in 1855 and died in 28. And he'd been in the Navy since 1875 and served from 1914 to 16, he was Commander-in-Chief of the Atlantic Fleet. The Atlantic Fleet included my father's battleship Wyoming. My father was a chief boatswain's mate, and one of his tasks was to pipe any visiting admirals on board. This is his photo of the so-called barge, Admiral Fletcher's barge, that brought the admiral to the ship. Okay, that's just a personal aside, but it does tell you a little bit more about Fletcher Street. And the other admirals are Mayo and Dewey and some of, can't remember them all right now. I think I've looked them all up. This is my final pair. It seems that much of what J.W. planned and built to City Beautiful ideals is being systematically demolished. Even the memory of Young himself somehow is being belittled. This was the original monument that they put up. Well, first off, I should say, Joseph Baumgarten, a sculptor, made this bust and had it cast at his own expense and gave it to the city, and they put it on this tall pedestal with a plaque saying who it was. His vision and courage created the city, and you could sit on the bench. This is was in Young Circle. And then it disappeared completely for a while, and now it's back, much smaller. And you may, I don't know, I didn't have a chance to check, but even a letter missing from the name of Young. So, many cities, now for the advertising. Many cities proudly care for and display their oldest structures, their heritage, but somehow not here. Visitors to our archives are literally thrilled when they enter and they see our montage of the early photos, and they want to know more. They buy our books, and like you all, they come to our lectures, they join our historic bike and walking tours. We commend those who have not only saved but maintained the 1920s and 30s Hollywood buildings, and also 50s now. We will continue. The Hollywood Historical Society will do what we can to maintain and present Hollywood's history. Thank you, and also some applause for Karen's photos. I don't know how to turn the lights off. Yeah.